Welcome to Herbal Explorations, a podcast hosted by Wilson Lau of Nuherbs. Each week, we speak to leading experts about what's happening in the herbal industry.
Welcome to another episode of Herbal Explorations. I'm joined today by Strengthening Organic Systems LLC, founded by Dietz and Gwendolyn Ward to improve resilience and integrity of the global organic supply chains, prevent fraud, and conduct investigations and provide training to ensure the highest standards are met and maintained across the sector. SOS serves the organic food and non-food sector. And I was just talking to Johanna, about organic livestock. So it's another area they do. Recently, Johanna Phillips has joined them, bringing great expertise from beyond the certification side of business. Kim and Johanna is joining us today to discuss the recent USDA Strengthening Organic Enforcement Regulations and the changes that it will bring. What are the top 3 changes that this new regulation will bring as in the food sector, food and supplement sector?
Well, thanks, Wilson. I'll go ahead and take that. Kim Dietz here. So thank you for having us on the podcast, and really excited. Wilson, you and I go way back, so I appreciate the relationship. There's many changes to the SOE rule, and if we think about when the original National Organic Program came in place in 2000. It was a huge undertaking to bring organic regulations to the USDA. So what we're really experiencing now is, tremendous growth from like a, $2 billion industry to over a $64 billion industry in 20-something years. So with that just comes some fine tuning of the regulations. And really a lot of it is around trying to just enforce more actions to make sure that the rule is enforceable and that ultimately the consumers can trust that seal, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the consumer and making sure that they understand what organic is and that they trust that. So there's a number of changes, but in particular, most of the changes come around supply chain, right? So we're talking about supply chain integrity and, pre-SOE, because that's kind of this time frame we're talking about. Really, there was a limited scope of who needed to be certified, and that was, anybody who farmed. So we've, the farmers, the handlers, those that produce the food, obviously livestock, and really what SOE does is expands that focus of who needs to be certified. So now today, we are folding in brokers and traders and warehouses, and in some cases retailers if they're producing food in the store and then shipping it to another store. So there's a lot of nuances, but that's the main change. There's also a lot of changes around importing and standardization of documents, right? So certification documents. Johanna will touch on some of the import documents that are going to be required. So that's another big change. But again, it's helping strengthen the organic pool and helping us make sure that organic is the sound program. And then the piece that we focus on really as a business and why we started was around the fraud prevention side. So anytime you have high cost product in limited supply, you're going to entice those cheaters, basically the fraudsters, we call them. And we have seen fraud in organic, right? So This rule also provides the trade and provides the National Organic Program with the tools that we need to combat fraud and to push it out in some ways, right? So it's bringing some more enforcement mechanisms, more around, jail time if somebody's caught with fraud. And it's also mandatory that people report fraud, right? So if you suspect fraud or if you have fraud in your supply chain, it's mandatory that you report it. So those to me are the big three. And Johanna, I'll, certainly value your input because you're a piece of our business that we really cherish.
Yeah, I would say you really nailed it, Kim. And I would also add some of the unsung critical elements of strengthening organic enforcement include that USDA now has authority over certified and uncertified entities, which is really critical part of the rule. So if businesses that are not certified are misrepresenting products as organic, USDA now has authority to take enforcement action on those entities. So that would be really probably the fourth element to add to.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're still trying to wrap our heads around is like, the enforcement comes really if you use the USDA organic seal are uncertified, but you can call it organic, and they don't have that enforcement ability. So I think we probably will need another set of rules to strengthen it some more.
Well, the term organic is actually the only regulated third-party certification by a federal agency out there. And if anyone is using the term organic and it is on a product that falls within the scope of the USDA National Organic Program, USDA has authority over it. And that's great news for the organic sector.
Great. So who are some people that need to get certified now that didn't have to get certified before?
Yeah, so the rule of thumb is really everybody needs to be certified now in the supply chain. And we can talk about the exemptions, but they're very limited. So what we advise our clients, and what the USDA is advising, is that if any doubt, get certified. But there are some very few exemptions. So Johanna, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the, handful of exemptions today with SOE.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. What I will say is, there are requirements throughout the rule for everyone in the supply chain, including exempt operations. So even if an operation is exempt from the requirement to become certified, they are required to maintain records, and they are also required to prevent commingling and contamination. They have to maintain the organic integrity of the products, even if they have a valid exemption. My recently former position was in certification directly. And what I told operations was, if you accept exempt operations in the supply chain, you need to understand that you become liable and responsible for the compliance of the exempt operations within your supply chain. So I think that's really important for businesses to understand and evaluate when it comes to their own system. But there are exemptions, and there are good reasons for there to be some exemptions. Retailers are exempt from the requirement to become certified, provided they have a physical building address. So they have to have a facility. So these online e-retailers, unless they have a physical sales location for the public, they are not exempt from the certification requirement. Businesses that are only handling final retail packaged product in sealed and tamper evident containers are exempt from the requirement to get certified, but certainly have the option to be voluntarily certified. So like, think of brand owners, as long as they're also not purchasing ingredients for their co-packer. So once a business is purchasing ingredients, they become a different part of the supply chain. So it's really important that businesses are fully evaluating all of their activities against the rule, because they may be exempt in one area and required to be certified in another activity. Brokering and trading products require certification, even if they don't physically handle the product. If they're transacting, sales, purchase, taking a few cents on every pound of product that requires certification. They are actually considered some of the highest risk areas in the supply chain. And there's still the exemption for less than $5,000 in sales. I will say is the exemptions are quite narrow. There's a section of the rule, I think it's 205-101, which talks about the exemptions. Certifiers spent a lot of time putting together exemptions flowchart and resources. So if businesses wonder if they should get certified, my suggestion would be they assume yes, and they contact a certifying agent and they ask for some of these exemption flowchart resources or ask for an exempt handler affidavit.
Or
Yeah,
they can
what
call
was
us. We'll help them.
yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely calling out to your helpful.
Gotta get a plug,
Love
Johanna.
it.
Yeah, I
Sorry
think
about that. Missed the boat there.
I think the other thing was interesting is that the standardization of documents, like you were mentioning earlier, Kim. It's like they have a 2D barcode. I don't know if you know this. They actually scan it and you can see all the product listings on that 2D barcode. The 2D barcode on the
On the-
certificate now.
Oh, on
And
the
you
news.
scan the
Yeah, on
2D
the
barcode,
OID.
Yeah.
it'll
Yeah.
pull up the entire list of the product list. So
It's good.
nifty little things.
That's great.
For one of the things was organic wasn't really stringent on non-retail labeling requirements. How has that changed?
Yeah, so let's talk about non-retail packaging because I think there's a little confusion on what that is. And that can be everything from, the totes that rice come in or grains to a pail of a flavor, or it's really any kind of, it could be a box of apples, right? Or a bin of apples, really. So it's the non-retail side. So those items that you wouldn't see in the store, typically, and they're usually in bulk, right? So they're not in a finished container. Some products actually get put in a container on the farm, like say strawberries, in a sealed container. They got machines and they're, packaging them right in the field and then they're going right to the store. So it's that tamper evident piece of the package that is really the most important thing to remember when we're talking about retail, non-retail, tamper evident, non-tamper evident. But at the end of the day, those non-retail containers have to just have some additional documentation with them, right? So there's some additional things required, like, what name of the certifier, Johanna, we'd have to, so there's some things that are currently existing, but some additional, a lot code. A lot of the same things that are required on a retail package are now required on the non-retail package. And it's all about traceability, right? So it's so that you can link that product to the last certified entity. And that's really what Strengthening Organic Enforcement is doing, is linking the supply chain all the way through so that we don't have gaps and that we don't have misses where there potentially could be fraud happening.
Makes a lot of sense. And my favorite topic, import certificates.
Okay.
So,
Johanna.
what do they, I looked at the video provided by the USDA and whatnot, but the reality is most of us don't file that stuff. We leave it for our custom brokers to do. Is there anything we should be cognizant of, although we're not actually doing the work of, uploading the certificates and information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important question. So each certifying agent was charged with setting their own parameters around how they plan to verify the integrity of the products. But the starting point is the final handler and the exporter need to be certified. Okay, so if that piece is not resolved, it's going to create problems getting an export or an import certificate for USDA National Organic Program. The certifier of the exporter is who is issuing the import certificate. So that is where that conversation needs to start and the request needs to be made. Timeline is going to be based on certifier policy, and cost of the import certificate will be based on certifier policy. But USDA did clarify that the import certificate needs to be requested before the product ships. And there is some time, if there's some information that needs to be updated, there is a little bit of time on receipt, but the importer into the United States also needs to be certified. Customs brokers, where they are strictly performing customs brokering activities, are exempt under the regulation, but the import certificate needs to be filed in the United States with Customs and Border Patrol. When you're thinking about like what is the import certificate and what information is required, it's not dissimilar to the EU transaction certificate requirements. It's not dissimilar to what used to be an optional transaction certificate. In fact, USDA used the transaction certificate format that they had issued previously. And so now that information is just getting put into USDA's new system.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really key step into reducing any potential fraud, is having to record that at the time of import. So I think that's a real good thing. And also, the other thing that we notice is that when we talk about these import certificates, you used to be able to, on a transaction certificate, you can list 10 things on it. Now they really want you to do one import certificate per item. So it's like, that could be the certifier, right? They just want to make more money, but
that's actually from, and that's actually a really great question, Wilson, and I'm glad you pointed that out, and I apologize I didn't say anything about it. When USDA was polling the marketplace in the industry, one of the things that came up was a concern about requiring an import certificate for each shipment. And so USDA said, okay, here is the accommodation we'll make to that, which is you can issue an import certificate certifying agents for up to 18 months. But if you do that, we're now saying that the give and take to that is that you can only put one product per import certificate because it can go for an extended period of time. What is also important to note is that it depends on the HTS code. So if multiple SKUs fall under the same HTS code, USDA has actually clarified that those multiple SKUs can be on the same import certificate. So hopefully that saves a little energy.
well, we'll see what the certifier says that are issuing that import certificate. But I think that's great information about the HTS code and be able to possibly get multiple things, because all our herbs are come under one code, right? I think that might be something that's good. So tell me a little bit more about the fraud prevention plans as part of SOE. Really, like, what kind of implementation considerations should we have? What should we be doing?
So this is a whole new, this is the new section of the rule, right? So it's going to be very similar to the organic system plan. So for those folks who out there listening that are already certified, you have to provide your organic system plan. This is going to be kind of like an addendum to that, and it's going to be your organic fraud prevention plan. And it's not a new concept. I just wanted to tell everybody that. And what we're seeing out there with our clients is that a majority of clients already have somewhat of a fraud prevention program because it's required by other entities such as BRC or any other food safety. So it's not a new concept, and in some ways you don't have to start all at the beginning. Now I won't say that that's not the case, because a lot of the small companies, small farmers, mid-sized companies don't have fraud prevention plans, and they don't have any of these other requirements. So there's a detailed process, and this is something that we are definitely helping our clients with is what's the framework around a fraud prevention plan. It can be very simple, tailor, if it's a small farm, it could just be a very simple because you don't have a lot of high risks, right? So it could be a very simple plan. Or it could be a very complex plan if you're a producer or a co-packer that's producing conventional product and organic product, and you've got, 300 brands and, 1,000 ingredients coming in. It could be very complex. But again, at the end of the day, it's all about risk, right? And so you always want to start with a risk assessment. That's one piece, is to really evaluate your business. It's not something that I can do or Johanna can do or you can do, Wilson. It's really stepping back and evaluating your own operation and saying, who do I get products from? Do I have relationships with my suppliers? Have I done supplier audits? Is this a domestic product? Is this an imported product? And really doing that assessment. So that risk assessment is key. Once you have a risk assessment, then you do a mitigation plan. And if you have a high risk ingredient, how are you going to monitor and how are you going to mitigate if you find something? And then, of course, the other piece, which we talked about, is actually if you do suspect fraud or if you see fraud, that it is mandatory that it has to be reported. So those are kind of the main chunks, the main elements of a fraud prevention plan. And, our word of advice to everybody is just get started. The expectation is not to have a whole fraud prevention program done and finished by March 19th of when the rule was implemented. Most of the certifiers are asking questions and they're asking you to outline the program and then fill in the blanks, right? And that's where, advisors like ourselves and other advisors out there are helping clients get those fraud prevention programs up to speed. But it's going to be an ongoing process, and it's not going to happen overnight. And nor does the USDA expect to have it happen overnight. They expect to have the plan and at least in the works and started, but certainly not finished. Johanna, any words from you on that?
No, I really think that was perfectly put, Kim.
And, one area of confusion I see, right, is because how they wrote the rules and regulations, they call it imported product, and these kind of things, documentation such as the import certificate. But I think a lot of people that are buying from the importers, such as ourselves, think they need to have an import certificate, whereas, we're taking care of that. And what's sort of like, any tips on that? Or is that sort of like, hey, if you buy it from someone in the US, they should have taken care of that already? So you don't need it's business as usual, or what's your thoughts?
Interesting.
So the standard, especially under SOE, there's really clear expectation of traceability and documentation maintenance by businesses. So what USDA has clarified is that the documentation needs to be present to demonstrate traceability, supply chain integrity, certified status of businesses, one forward and one back. So just to give an example of when an operation would need to get the import certificate, if the importer of record is the customs broker, then the next certified entity needs to get that import certificate. But they don't need to have the import certificate if the transaction happened with the certified entity before them. They would need to just have traceability of purchase and the organic certificate for that business and any exempt businesses that they received product from while it was in their control.
One question that I had about is what needs to happen for, let's say, you buy a certified organic herb from me and you make it into a supplement. And now you want to export that supplement to Canada or Europe. is there any special paperwork that needs to go along with that, or what should we know about those scenarios?
So let's start with, is the herb in the United States already,
Yeah.
or is it going to be imported?
Let's just assume that Clear Customs is the U.S. already, right?
Okay. So
Let's
it's
make it
now
really
in the
good.
United States, and you're a USDA certified broker for this product or an ingredient supplier?
Ingredient supplier.
Okay. So, and then it's going to Canada.
No. I'm selling it to a client who's going to make a product using that organic ingredient. So think like I imported organic green tea, Clear Customs. I sold it to Kim. Kim makes organic tea bags, right? And now she wants to sell her Kim's organic green tea into Canada, right? Is there any special paperwork that she needs from us
Yes.
or returnally to export that
Yeah.
organic product? A certified organic product.
Yeah, I mean, you asked a really good and also very complicated question. So, the product, let's assume that the tea was imported. It's Clear Customs, but if it's a multi-source product, then there's going to be some sourcing requirements that would have to be verified, in particular for distribution to Canada. So USDA and Canada have an equivalence arrangement. And so the product would need to be verified that it wasn't produced with hydroponic methods, and also that it wasn't grown with the use of Chilean nitrate. So those pieces actually need to be verified all the way back to the farm level, which is a complicated requirement for a product that's, made its way probably through multiple hands and may actually come from multiple different farms for each of the ingredients. So that has to be verified all the way back to the farm level. And then that information would get submitted to the certifying agent for U.S. core equivalents. And there are some specific labeling requirements for Canada. So Canada requires, I believe that labels are in both French and English, and there are some specific labeling criteria. So there are some requirements there. It's completely doable, but it is complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like it's the same as before SOE, right?
Yes.
So there's no additional paperwork that's needed, right? So that I think that was really the question, right? It's like I think people are worried like, oh, now you need import certificates, well, do you need,
the export side is pretty straightforward, because as long as, like Johanna said, you've got product here, it's compliant in the US, and then you manufacture something or you want to ship it out, then as long as it's compliant with those rules. I think a lot of the questions we are getting, though, is, around equivalency. Like, let's say a product's coming from Canada and it's coming into the US, do they need fraud prevention plans, right? So a lot of it is, some of the areas of the equivalency agreements aren't quite up to speed yet on the National Organic Program rule. So what do we do in those cases, right? Are those entities that are in another country required to have the same NOP rules starting March 17th as those in the United States? And I don't know the answer. Johanna, maybe you know the answer, because I don't.
Well, actually, I think, one of the exciting things about SOE is that it includes requirements for how USDA needs to enter into international equivalence requirements and agreements. So, and the reason we have, for example, the Chilean nitrate and the hydroponic verification requirement is because Canada and the US evaluated each other's standards and said, you're close enough in all of the areas but these particular requirements. So we are expecting to see some renegotiation on equivalence arrangements because of the SOE requirements. And that's that definitely, hopefully, will make things more straightforward.
Thank you so much for your time today, and It was really informative. I think listeners will really learn a lot from listening to the wisdom that you're able to share. And what is your website if they wanted to reach out to you?
It is www.organicsos.com.
Perfect. And I can't think of a person working with and Jim on this. So.
Oh, thanks, Wilson.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the business of herbs and botanicals, visit Nuherbs.com. To keep listening to great episodes, be sure to subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, or Spotify, and make sure to give us a rating too.